Hello there, seeker of silence, and welcome back to Gotham, where the city never truly sleeps, but sometimes it listens. Tonight, we step into the dim glow of street lamps and flickering neon, where something unusual has begun to stir beneath the surface of steel and stone. If these quiet stories bring you peace, feel free to subscribe and settle in as we follow the slow unraveling of a mystery hidden within the veins of Gotham itself. The rain had already passed, leaving the streets slick and reflective like dark glass stretching between buildings that leaned inward as if sharing secrets. From the edge of a rooftop, high above the murmuring hum of distant traffic, a lone figure remained still. He had been there for some time, watching, not the people, not the movement below, but the light. Gotham's skyline pulsed unevenly that night. Windows that should have remained lit had gone dark. Others flickered in brief, irregular patterns, like signals sent between unseen hands. It was subtle, easy to miss, but not to him. The cape shifted slightly in the evening breeze as he tilted his head, eyes tracing the faint rhythm of outages stretching across several blocks. Old districts mostly, buildings long forgotten by the city's brighter ambitions. He tapped a control on his gauntlet. A faint projection appeared, casting a dim blue grid across the inside of his lens. Power lines, substations, flow rates, and there it was, a pattern, not random, not decay, something deliberate. The outages formed a path, one that curved through Gotham's older bones, weaving between abandoned factories, derelict apartments, and structures that no longer appeared on most official maps. He exhaled slowly, then stepped back from the ledge. Moments later, the silence of the rooftop gave way to motion. The alley below was narrow, lined with brick darkened by years of rain and neglect. A single overhead wire buzzed faintly, its light dim and unstable. He landed without a sound. The street beyond carried on, unaware. A passing car splashed through a shallow puddle. Somewhere in the distance, a siren rose briefly, then faded. He moved forward, keeping to the edges where shadow gathered more thickly. The first location was close. An old textile warehouse, long since shut down, its windows boarded, its entrance chained. The city had marked it for demolition years ago, but no one had come to finish the job. He paused across the street, studying it. Nothing moved, no guards, no visible entry, but the lights inside flickered, not brightly, not enough to draw attention, just enough to suggest presence. He crossed the street. The chain on the main door had been cut, cleanly. Inside, the air carried a faint scent of dust and old machinery. The space stretched wide and hollow, filled with the quiet remains of its former purpose: rusted frames, broken conveyor belts, and stacks of forgotten crates. Above, a single strip of light blinked. On, off, on. He stepped further in. The floor creaked softly beneath his weight, though he moved with care. His gaze swept across the room, pausing as something caught his attention near the far wall. A panel, new, out of place against the aged brick. He approached slowly. The panel had been recently installed, its surface still clean, untouched by the grime that coated everything else. A faint hum pulsed from within. Power. He reached out, running a gloved hand along its edge. Then, a sound. Footsteps. Not loud, not rushed, measured. He turned slightly, just enough to catch the reflection in a nearby metal surface. A figure, moving through the upper walkway, too quick to identify, gone as soon as it appeared. He didn't follow immediately. Instead, he looked back at the panel, then up. A choice. The hum beneath his hand pulsed again, steady, controlled. Not a random intrusion, a system being tested. He stepped back from the wall, and then, without hesitation, moved toward the stairwell leading to the upper level. The metal steps echoed faintly as he ascended, each movement placed with intention. Above, the walkway stretched across the warehouse interior, narrow and lined with railings that had begun to rust. The air felt different here, charged. He reached the top, paused, listened. Nothing now. No footsteps, no movement, only the distant hum below. He walked forward, scanning the shadows between the support beams. And then, near the far end, a door, slightly open. A thin line of light spilled through the gap, cutting across the floor. He approached, carefully. The light flickered once, twice, as if aware of his presence. His hand reached the edge of the door. He pushed, slowly. Inside, the room was small, filled with equipment that did not belong to the building's past. Screens, cables, a central console pulsing with quiet energy. And on the main display, a map of Gotham. Segments of the city lit in sequence, the same pattern, the same path, continuing. He stepped closer. The screen shifted, lines recalibrated, and then a message appeared. Simple, white text against black. Level 1 complete. He stood still, watching. The hum of the system deepened slightly, as if preparing for something further, and somewhere beyond the walls of that forgotten warehouse, another section of the city flickered. The message lingered on the screen for a moment longer, steady and unhurried, as though it had all the time in the world. Then it vanished. The map remained, its faint glow illuminating the edges of the room, casting long shadows across cables and metal frames. A thin line began to trace itself across the display once more, extending beyond the cluster of buildings he had just passed through. The pattern was continuing. He leaned slightly closer, eyes following the route as it curved eastward, toward a part of Gotham that had long since slipped from relevance. A district where the streets narrowed and the buildings leaned into each other like tired companions. The Narrows, of course. The system pulsed again, and for a brief moment another line appeared, fainter, almost hidden beneath the primary path. A secondary route, branching outward before dissolving into static. He reached for the console, fingers brushing lightly across its surface. Warm, active, recently used. But whoever had been here was already gone. A faint draft moved through the room, carrying with it the distant sound of something metallic shifting below. Not movement, not footsteps. Just the building settling, or something within it. He straightened, stepping back from the console. The screen dimmed slightly, as if reacting to his distance, though it did not power down entirely. Curious. He turned his attention to the rest of the room. There were no personal items, no signs of habitation, only function, purpose. Every cable placed with care, every device aligned with quiet precision. This wasn't a hideout, it was a station, one of many. He moved toward the far wall where a second door stood closed. Unlike the first, this one bore no light beneath it, no indication of activity beyond. He rested a hand against it, cool, still. But as he applied a gentle pressure, the door shifted open with little resistance. Beyond it, a narrow corridor stretched into darkness, the air within carrying a faint electrical scent, sharper than before. He stepped inside. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. The corridor led downward, not by stairs but by a gradual slope, the floor angling just enough to draw him deeper beneath the structure. Overhead, small recessed lights flickered at irregular intervals, casting brief, uneven illumination across the walls. Pipes ran along the ceiling, some old, some newly installed, Their surfaces reflected faint glimmers as he passed beneath them. The deeper he went, the stronger the hum became. Not loud, but present. A constant vibration that seemed to resonate through the walls themselves. At the end of the corridor, the space opened into a larger chamber. Here, the architecture changed. The aged brick gave way to reinforced steel. The floor was clean, unmarred by dust or debris. Panels lined the walls, each one emitting a soft, steady glow. At the center of the room stood a single structure, tall, rectangular, encased in glass. Inside, energy moved, not wildly, not chaotically, but in controlled, deliberate currents, flowing along pathways that shifted and reformed in slow looping patterns. He approached it. The glass reflected his silhouette back at him, dark against the pale light within. For a moment, the movement inside seemed to adjust, responding not to touch but to presence. Observing. He tilted his head slightly, studying the flow. This wasn't just a power redistribution system. It was learning, testing different routes, adjusting output, measuring response. The outages across the city, they weren't failures, they were trials. He circled the structure, noting the connections running from its base into the surrounding panels. Each cable was labeled, each connection precise, and then, near the back, a marking, small, etched into the metal surface beside one of the ports. Not a company logo, not a manufacturer's stamp. Something else. A symbol, simple in design, but unfamiliar. A series of intersecting lines, forming a shape that almost resembled a game board or a grid. He reached out, tracing it lightly with his glove. Worn, handled more than once. Whoever built this had left it intentionally, a signature or a challenge. The hum shifted again, subtle but noticeable. He turned back toward the central structure. The energy within had changed its pattern, faster now, more focused, as if it had reached a conclusion. And then, a soft sound behind him. He didn't turn immediately. Instead, he watched the reflection in the glass. A figure stood at the entrance to the chamber, still, watching him in return. The distance between them remained. Neither moved. For a moment, the only sound was the low, steady hum of the system between them. Then the figure tilted its head slightly, not in curiosity, in acknowledgement, and just as quietly as it had appeared, it stepped back. Gone. He turned. The corridor stood empty, no echo of retreating footsteps. No movement along the walls, only the flickering lights and the path leading upward. He moved quickly now, retracing his steps through the corridor, ascending back toward the warehouse above. The door at the top remained closed. He opened it. The upper walkway was unchanged, still, silent. But the door at the far end, the one leading into the control room, was now fully open. The light inside flickered more rapidly. He crossed the walkway, entered. The screens had shifted. The map of Gotham now displayed a new segment, highlighted in faint blue. The path had extended further, toward the Narrows. And at the bottom of the display, the message returned. Not the same as before. This time, it read, "Level 2 initiated." He watched as the lights on the map began to change once more, one district after another dimming briefly before returning to life. A sequence, a progression, and always moving forward. He reached out, pulling a small device from his belt, connecting it to the console. Data began to transfer, slowly, carefully. But as it did, the screen flickered again, and for just a moment, another message appeared. Not centered, not meant to be seen so easily. Observer detected. The transfer paused. The system hesitated, then resumed. But something had changed. The hum beneath the building deepened, more focused now, as if the machine below had taken note of him. He disconnected the device, stepped back. The lights above flickered once more, and somewhere beyond the walls of that forgotten place, another part of Gotham dimmed. The message faded as quietly as it had appeared, leaving only the shifting map and the low, steady glow of the system. For a moment he remained still, watching the display as if it might reveal something further. It did not. The pattern continued its slow expansion, threading deeper into the city, tracing routes that avoided the obvious, slipping instead through places where few would think to look. The Narrows waited at the edge of it. He turned from the console. The warehouse felt different now. Not louder, not brighter, but aware in a way it hadn't been before. The faint hum beneath the floor no longer seemed distant. It followed him, present in each step, carried through the structure like a breath held just beneath the surface. He crossed the walkway and descended the metal stairs, his movement measured, unhurried. Outside, the city carried on. The streetlights cast long reflections across the wet pavement. A taxi rolled past at the end of the block, its tires whispering against the road. Somewhere above, a window closed with a dull click. Nothing unusual. And yet, beneath it all, something continued to move. The Narrows rose ahead like a shadow given form. Buildings pressed close together, their upper floors leaning inward, narrowing the sky to a thin, uneven ribbon. Lights flickered here more often, some windows going dark for seconds before returning, others remaining dim as if unsure whether to stay awake at all. He moved along the rooftops. The distance between structures was shorter here, the gaps easier to cross. Clotheslines stretched between windows, swaying slightly in the night air. Water dripped steadily from gutters, forming small, persistent rhythms below. He paused near the edge of one building, crouching low. Below, a group of men stood near a doorway, their voices low, their attention fixed on something inside. The light above them flickered twice, then steadied. One of them glanced upward, not at him, at the light. He followed the man's gaze. The bulb hummed faintly, its glow uneven, pulsing with the same subtle rhythm he had seen across the city. Another node. He moved on. The second location revealed itself not through signs of intrusion, but through absence. A building that should have been occupied wasn't. Its windows were intact, its structure stable, yet no light shone from within. The street outside was quiet, untouched by the usual signs of life. He landed on the fire escape, the metal frame creaking faintly beneath his weight. The window nearest him had been opened slightly, not forced, left that way. He slipped inside. The room was bare, save for a few scattered pieces of furniture left behind, an overturned chair, a small table near the far wall. Dust had settled unevenly across the floor, disturbed only in narrow paths that led deeper into the building. He followed them, through a hallway, down a stairwell. Each step carried him further from the surface, the sounds of the street fading until only the distant hum remained. At the base of the stairs, a door stood ajar. Beyond it, a faint glow. He entered. This room was smaller than the last, more compact, more contained. But the design was the same. Panels lined the walls, cables feeding into a central structure, though this one was different, lower, broader, its surface covered in a series of shifting lights that moved in quiet patterns. He approached it. The lights responded. Not immediately, not dramatically, but subtly, their rhythm adjusting as he drew closer, as though recognizing the presence that had already passed through the previous station. He studied the display. The pattern here was more refined, the routes cleaner, more direct. The system had learned from the earlier tests, reducing inefficiencies, correcting deviations. He reached out, hovering his hand just above the surface. Warm again, consistent. And then, a sound, closer this time. Not footsteps, a shift of fabric, a presence moving through the space behind him. He turned. The figure stood near the doorway. Clearer now, still partially obscured by shadow, but closer than before. No sudden movement, no attempt to flee, just observation. "You're ahead of schedule," the figure said. The voice was calm, measured, neither strained nor hurried. He did not respond. The figure took a single step forward, the faint light catching the edge of their outline. Most take longer to notice the pattern. A pause. The hum of the system filled the space between them. "You skipped the obvious paths," the figure continued, "avoided the distractions." Another step, still not close enough to reveal a face. "That's efficient." He shifted slightly, placing himself between the figure and the central structure. The lights along the device flickered once, then steadied. The figure noticed. Of course they did. "You think this is about control," they said. "About power." A slight tilt of the head. "It isn't." The lights dimmed briefly, then returned. "It's about response." Silence settled again, not empty, but weighted with the presence of something just beyond reach. "You saw the first stage," the figure said. "Imperfect, scattered." A faint motion of the hand toward the device. "This one is better." Another pause. "And the next." The sentence did not finish. Instead, the figure stepped back, slowly, deliberately. "You'll follow it," they said. "You already are." The doorway darkened as they moved beyond it, and then they were gone. No echo of departure, no sign of direction, only the faint hum and the steady glow of the machine. He remained still for a moment longer, then turned back to the device. The lights had shifted again, the pattern extending further, toward the river. Toward a part of Gotham where the old infrastructure still lingered beneath newer layers. Forgotten tunnels, abandoned substations, places where the city's earliest systems still breathed quietly beneath the streets. He stepped back. The room dimmed slightly as if acknowledging the end of this phase. He moved toward the exit. Back above, the Narrows continued its quiet rhythm. A window flickered. A streetlight dimmed. And far in the distance, beyond the clustered rooftops, another section of the city followed suit. The pattern was accelerating, refining itself, learning. He looked toward the river. The next point awaited. The rooftops thinned as he moved east, giving way to wider streets and longer shadows. The Narrows receded behind him, its tight corridors replaced by older avenues that led toward Gotham's industrial edge. Here, the buildings stood farther apart, taller, colder. The river lay ahead, a dark expanse that reflected only fragments of light, broken by the slow drift of debris and the faint ripple of passing currents. He paused atop a weathered structure overlooking the docks. Below, the city's older infrastructure revealed itself in quiet ways. Rusted cranes left motionless, shipping containers stacked without purpose, and the faint outline of a substation tucked between two long-abandoned warehouses. That was where the pattern led. The lights in that section had already begun to shift, not flickering now, but dimming in sequence, each one responding to something unseen beneath the surface. He descended. The ground near the docks carried a different scent, heavier, touched by water and oil and years of forgotten use. His boots met the concrete without sound as he moved along the edge of the substation. The structure itself was partially enclosed, its perimeter marked by a low barrier, and a gate that hung slightly open. Inside, the equipment stood in quiet rows: transformers, switches, lines that extended outward into the city. Most of it was old, some of it wasn't. He stepped through the gate. The hum here was stronger, more focused. It didn't disperse into the air as it had before. It gathered, concentrated within the space as if drawn inward toward a single point. At the far end of the substation, a door had been installed. New metal against aging concrete. He approached it. No handle, no visible lock. Just a flat surface, uninterrupted. He raised his hand toward it. Before he touched it, the surface shifted. A narrow seam appeared, then widened, the door sliding open without a sound. Inside, a narrow chamber awaited. He entered. The door closed behind him. The chamber descended more steeply than the last. A stairwell this time, spiraling downward, its walls lined with cables that pulsed faintly with passing energy. The deeper he went, the quieter the world above became, replaced entirely by the steady, measured rhythm of the system below. At the base of the stairs, the space opened once more, larger than before, more complete. The architecture here was deliberate, every surface smooth, every line precise. Panels extended across the walls in layered sections, each one feeding into a central structure that stood taller than the others. This was not a station, it was a core. Energy moved within it in clear, defined channels, no longer experimenting, no longer adjusting in small increments. The flow was confident now, directed with purpose. He approached slowly. The air felt warmer here, though not uncomfortably so. The hum resonated through the floor, through the walls, through the very structure of the room. He stopped just short of the central unit. And then, as before, a reflection. Not behind him this time, beside him. He turned his head slightly. The figure stood at the edge of the chamber, near one of the panels, hands loosely at their sides, still indistinct, still calm. "You see it now," they said. Their voice carried easily in the space, unhurried, as though they had been waiting for this moment. He did not respond. The figure stepped forward, their movement steady, deliberate. "No more fragments," they continued. "No more tests without direction." They gestured toward the core. This is where it begins to matter. The energy within the structure shifted slightly, the lines tightening, refining, as if aligning themselves with something unseen. "You followed the path," the figure said. "You adapted to it." Another step closer. "And now it adapts to you." He turned fully, facing them. The light in the room revealed more of their outline, but not enough to give shape to a face or detail to their expression. Only presence. Only intention. "You think this is a threat," they said. "A system to be stopped." A pause. "It isn't built for that." The hum deepened briefly, then steadied again. "It observes, it adjusts, it improves." They tilted their heads slightly. "And it learns from resistance." The lights along the panels flickered once, then synchronized. "You're part of it now," they added. The words settled into the space without weight, without urgency, simply stated. He glanced back at the core. The flow within it had changed again. Not dramatically, but enough. It no longer moved as it had before. It anticipated. Small shifts in direction, occurring before the previous patterns had fully completed. A step ahead. He looked back toward the figure. "You built this," he said. The figure was still for a moment. Then a slight motion. "Built?" they repeated. A quiet exhale. "No." Another step back. It was always possible. They turned slightly, as if considering the structure from a different angle. I just gave it the opportunity. The lights dimmed briefly, then returned stronger than before. And now, they said, it continues. The core pulsed once. A single steady surge that traveled outward through the cables, through the panels, through the systems that connected it to the city above. Somewhere far beyond the walls, another section of Gotham responded. Lights dimmed, then returned. Smoother this time, more precise. The figure turned back toward him. You'll keep following it, they said. Not a question. A certainty, because you want to know where it leads. They stepped toward the edge of the chamber, and so do I. The light shifted again. For a moment, the figure's outline blurred against the brightness, and then they were gone. No door, no passage. Only the steady hum and the presence of the core. He remained where he stood, watching the energy as it continued its measured flow. The system had reached another stage, not complete, not yet, but closer. He turned. The stairwell waited behind him. Above, the city carried on, unaware of the adjustments taking place beneath its streets. He ascended. At the surface, the river moved slowly, reflecting the distant lights of Gotham's skyline. But something had changed. The flickering was less erratic now, more controlled, more deliberate. The pattern was no longer searching. It was choosing. He looked across the water, toward the city beyond. Somewhere ahead, another point waited. Another step in the sequence, and the system continued. The river carried a slow, steady current, drawing faint reflections of the skyline into long, wavering lines. From the dock's edge, Gotham appeared almost settled, its lights more consistent now, less prone to the uneven flicker that had first drawn his attention. But the pattern had not stopped. It had changed. He stood for a moment longer, watching the distant buildings as their windows held a steadier glow. The irregular pulses had given way to something smoother, more refined, as if the system beneath the city had learned to move without drawing notice. A quieter method. He turned from the water. The next point had already revealed itself. Not through disruption this time, but through absence. A section of the city where the lights had not changed at all. Untouched, unincluded. He moved. The route led him away from the industrial edge, back into Gotham's older districts, where the architecture carried traces of earlier decades. Arched windows, worn stone, narrow courtyards hidden between taller structures. The streets here were calmer. A few late walkers passed beneath street lamps, their footsteps soft against the pavement. A distant train moved somewhere beneath the city, its low rumble fading as it traveled further underground. He kept to the rooftops, moving along ledges and fire escapes, crossing the narrow gaps between buildings with practiced ease. The untouched section lay ahead, a block where the lights remained constant, unaffected by the shifting pattern around it. He landed on a rooftop overlooking the area. Below, the buildings stood unchanged, their windows lit with a steady, unwavering glow. No flicker, no interruption, a still point. He crouched, studying it. If the system had refined itself across the rest of the city, why leave this untouched, a variable, or something else? He descended. The street was quieter here, not empty, but subdued. A small cafe near the corner remained open, its interior lit warmly, a single figure seated by the window, unmoving except for the occasional lift of a cup. Across the street, a bookstore displayed its final arrangement before closing, its lights steady, undisturbed. Nothing unusual. And yet, the air felt different, not charged like the previous locations, not humming with hidden energy, but still, as if this place existed slightly apart from the rest of the city's rhythm. He moved along the sidewalk, his gaze shifting between the buildings, searching for any sign of alteration. There was none, until a door, set into the side of an otherwise ordinary structure, unmarked, closed, but unlike the others, it carried no signs of age, no chipped paint, no worn edges. It stood in quiet contrast to its surroundings, subtle but deliberate. He approached. The surface was smooth beneath his glove. No seam, no visible mechanism. He waited. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint shift. The door opened inward. Inside, the space was unlike the others. No panels lined the walls. No cables traced along the ceiling. No central structure pulsed with visible energy. Instead, the room was simple, minimal. A single table stood at its center. On it, a device. Small, contained. Its surface smooth, unmarked except for a faint, steady glow that did not flicker or change. He stepped inside. The door closed behind him. The room remained still. No hum, no vibration. Only the quiet presence of the device. He approached it. Slower this time, more deliberate. This was not a station, not a core. Something else. He reached the table and paused, studying the object. Its light was consistent, unwavering. Unlike the systems before, it showed no sign of adaptation or adjustment. It simply remained. He extended his hand. As his fingers hovered above the surface, the light shifted slightly. Not brighter, not dimmer, just enough to acknowledge. And then, a voice behind him. "You noticed." He did not turn immediately. The voice was familiar, measured, unhurried. "You followed the pattern," the figure continued, "and now you've reached what it avoids." He turned. The figure stood near the door as before, their form partially obscured yet unmistakable in presence. "This place," they said, gesturing lightly toward the room, "was not included." A pause. Not because it couldn't be. Another step forward. But because it shouldn't. The words settled into the space without emphasis, without explanation. He glanced back at the device. Its light remained steady, unchanging. "Why?" he asked. The figure tilted their head slightly. "As the system grows," they said, "it refines. It removes inefficiencies. It learns what to adjust and what to leave untouched." They moved closer to the table, though still maintaining distance. "This," they continued, "is a constant." The device pulsed once, softly, then returned to its steady glow. "A reference point," the figure added. "Without it, the system would lose direction." They looked at him. "And so would you." Silence followed, not empty, but complete. He studied the device again. It did not react further, did not adapt, did not learn. It simply existed, a fixed point in a system built on change. He lowered his hand, stepped back. The figure watched him. "You see it now," they said, a faint shift in their posture. "Not everything needs to be controlled." Another pause. "Some things are meant to remain." The light in the room remained steady, casting soft reflections across the surface of the table. Outside, beyond the walls, the city continued its quiet rhythm, unaware of the stillness held within this single space. The figure turned slightly, as if preparing to leave. "The next stage," they said, then stopped. A small pause. "It won't look like the others." They stepped back. "And it won't wait." The door behind them opened. They moved through it and were gone. He remained in the room for a moment longer, watching the device, the constant. Then he turned. The door opened as he approached. Outside, the street was unchanged. The cafe still lit, the bookstore still open. Everything as it had been, except now. The pattern beyond this place had grown clearer, more defined, and whatever came next would not follow the same path. The door closed behind him with a quiet finality, and the steady glow of that untouched room remained sealed within the walls. Outside, the city resumed its rhythm as if nothing had shifted. But something had. He stood at the edge of the sidewalk for a moment, watching the street lamps hold their light without interruption. The buildings here still carried that sense of separation, as though they existed slightly apart from the wider system now threading through Gotham. A constant, a reference. He turned his gaze outward, beyond the block, toward the larger sprawl of the city. There, the pattern had begun to change again, not in flickers or outages, but in timing. Lights across several districts dimmed in sequence, then returned almost immediately. Their transitions smooth, nearly imperceptible unless one knew where to look. No longer testing, no longer searching, executing. He moved. The rooftops welcomed him again, their familiar lines guiding him forward as he crossed from one structure to the next. The air carried a faint chill now, the kind that settled into the spaces between buildings, drifting along narrow corridors and open avenues alike. Below, Gotham continued its quiet motion. A late train passed beneath the streets, its distant rumble rising briefly through the concrete before fading again. A pair of figures walked side by side along an empty stretch of road, their voices too low to carry upward. Nothing drew attention, nothing needed to. The system no longer relied on disruption. It had learned subtlety. He paused atop a higher structure, one that overlooked a wide section of the city's midline. From here, the pattern revealed itself more clearly. Sections of Gotham dimmed and brightened in flowing sequences, not random, not isolated, but connected in a continuous movement that spread outward from multiple points. Not one core, many. Working together. He narrowed his focus. The earlier locations, the warehouse, the Narrows, the substation, they were no longer the center. They were part of a network, each node feeding into the next, each adjustment informing the system as a whole. And now, the network was aligning, a final stage. He shifted slightly, adjusting the display within his lens. Data streams overlaid the city, tracing energy flows, mapping transitions. The pattern formed a shape, not linear, not circular, but structured, intentional. He followed it with his gaze, from the docks, through the Narrows, across the untouched block, and outward, toward the heart of Gotham. He stepped back from the ledge, then forward again, and moved. The closer he came to the city's center, the more refined the system became. There were no visible installations here, no abandoned buildings repurposed, no hidden chambers beneath forgotten streets. Everything appeared as it always had. Glass towers, bright signage, well-lit avenues stretching between ordered rows of architecture. And yet, the pattern moved through it all, unseen. He landed on the edge of a building overlooking a broad intersection. Traffic lights shifted in perfect sequence, not abrupt, not mechanical, but timed with a precision that felt deliberate. A car slowed just before the light changed. Another moved through the intersection without hesitation. Pedestrians crossed without pause, every motion aligned. He watched. The system was no longer confined to power. It extended into behavior, subtle, guiding, adjusting timing, flow, response. He tilted his head slightly. Then, a reflection. In the glass of the building beside him, the figure stood there once more, not behind, not ahead, alongside. "You're seeing it," they said, Their voice carried easily across the space, calm as before. He did not turn. The reflection remained enough. "It's not about the grid," the figure continued. "That was only the beginning." A brief pause. "The city is a system." The traffic below shifted again, each movement following the next with quiet precision. Energy, motion, choice. The figure's outline remained steady in the glass, and all of it can be understood. He finally turned. The figure stood at the rooftop's edge, looking out over the city, closer now than before, still obscured, still undefined. "You built something that interferes," he said. The figure remained still. "No," they replied. "I built something that listens." They gestured faintly toward the streets below. "It observes patterns. It learns responses. It adjusts in ways that don't disrupt, but improve." The traffic lights shifted again. Perfect timing, no delay, no hesitation. "It reduces inefficiency," the figure added. Another pause. "And it does so without being seen." The city stretched outward, its light steady, its movement smooth. He looked across it, then back. "And the final stage?" he asked. The figure was silent for a moment. Then, "It's already happening." The lights across the skyline dimmed, not abruptly, but together. A slow, unified shift, then they returned. Brighter, more stable. The system had aligned. Across the entire city, a single network, working in harmony. The figure stepped closer to the edge. "This is where it stops being tested," they said, a faint motion of their hand, "and starts being trusted." They turned slightly, their form catching the light just enough to suggest the outline of a face, though still without detail. "You could stop it," they said, not as a challenge, not as a warning. Simply as a fact. He remained still, watching. The city below moved as one continuous flow, no disruption, no visible flaw, just alignment. The figure nodded once, as if acknowledging the thought. "But you won't," they said. A pause. "Because you've seen what it becomes." The wind shifted slightly across the rooftop, carrying with it the distant sounds of Gotham's endless motion. The figure stepped back. "And because part of you..." They stopped, the sentence left unfinished. Then they were gone. He stood alone at the edge of the building. The city stretched out before him, its lights steady, its movement refined. The system had reached its final stage, not loud, not forceful, but present in everything. He remained there for a time, watching as the pattern continued, not in bursts or flickers, but in smooth, continuous motion. Then he turned and stepped back into the shadows. The city continued as it always had. From above, Gotham stretched in long avenues of light and shadow, its movement steady, its rhythm uninterrupted. Cars flowed through intersections without pause, their paths aligning with signals that shifted at just the right moment. Windows glowed across distant towers, their light consistent now, no longer flickering at the edges of attention. It all appeared ordinary. And yet, beneath that surface, something had settled into place. He remained on the rooftop a while longer, watching the movement below as it carried on without awareness. There was no sign of the system now, no visible trace of the paths it had taken or the adjustments it had made. Only the result. A city that moved with quiet precision. The wind drifted between the buildings, catching briefly along the edge of his cape before passing on, slipping into the narrow spaces below. Somewhere in the distance, a door closed. A faint echo followed, then faded into the steady hum of life continuing. He turned his gaze outward, tracing the skyline from one end to the other. Every district held its light. Every street followed its course. No interruptions, no signals left to decode. The pattern had completed itself, or perhaps it had simply become too seamless to notice. He moved across the rooftops again, not in pursuit this time, but in observation. The places he had visited remained unchanged in appearance. The warehouse stood as it had before, its broken windows still dark against the night. No glow escaped its interior now, no flicker to suggest the presence of the system that had once operated within its walls. The Narrows held its usual stillness, its narrow streets and close-set buildings wrapped in their familiar quiet. The flickering lights had steadied there as well, blending into the natural imperfections of the district. At the river, the docks lay still, their surfaces reflecting the distant city in long, uneven lines. The substation showed no sign of alteration, its exterior as worn as ever. And the untouched block. He paused there once more. The cafe had closed, its lights dimmed behind drawn shades. The bookstore stood dark, its display no longer visible through the glass. The unmarked door remained, closed, as though it had never opened. He stood across the street, watching it for a moment. No movement came, no signal, no change. The constant remained constant. He turned away. Higher now, where the city stretched further into the distance, he stopped once more. The skyline held steady. The system had not announced itself. It had not demanded recognition. It had simply integrated, quietly, completely. The thought lingered for a moment, then passed. There would always be patterns in Gotham, always something beneath the surface, moving in ways not immediately seen. This was no different, only refined. His gaze shifted to the reflection in a nearby window. For a brief moment, it seemed as though another shape stood there beside him. Not behind, not approaching, just present. Then the reflection shifted with the angle of the glass and it was gone. He did not turn. There was nothing to follow now, nothing to pursue. Only a city that had found a new way to move. Below, a final sequence passed through the streets. Lights dimmed, then returned. Smooth. Measured. Almost imperceptible. If one had not been watching, and it might never have been noticed at all, he remained at the edge of the rooftop, his attention resting on that subtle shift as it traveled outward, then faded into the broader rhythm of the night. The system did not stop. It did not end. It simply continued, adjusting, refining, becoming part of the quiet, endless motion of Gotham. Time moved, though it was difficult to mark its passing from such a vantage. The city's sound softened, then changed, as different hours brought different rhythms. Traffic lessened in some places, grew in others. Lights dimmed in certain buildings, brightened in others. And through it all, the pattern held, not as something separate, but as something woven into the whole. He stepped back from the ledge at last. The rooftop stretched behind him, empty and still. Above, the sky carried only a faint trace of light, the clouds drifting slowly across its surface, reflecting the city below in muted tones. He moved once more, not toward any particular destination, but along the familiar paths that traced Gotham's upper edges, watching, listening, not for disruption, but for change, and finding none that called for action. Somewhere, far below, a streetlight flickered once, then steadied. A small adjustment, barely noticed, but present. And then, nothing more. Only the city, only its steady, continuous motion, and the quiet understanding that whatever had begun beneath its streets had not ended. It had simply become.